What's up, guys, and welcome to the weekly Q&A. Our first question comes from Insane, who asks what we think happened to Barriss Offee after the Clone Wars.
I was one of the people that kind of wished that she were an Inquisitor in Star Wars Rebels, especially when the Seventh Sister is, like, the same species. Why not just make it Barriss?
Yeah.
But Henry Gilroy said something about this at DragonCon. Didn't mention it in our one-on-one interview. I forgot to ask him, but in a panel, he, in kind of his own headcanon, which I don't think that means it's absolutely true, but he is a writer for the Clone Wars and Rebels, so his headcanon gets a little extra weight. But he was like, do you really think that Darth Vader would let her live after what she did to Ahsoka? So she might be dead.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, she could be around somewhere and pop back up. I think, didn't you say Dave Filoni said that maybe she would come back at some point?
He promised years ago that, like, oh, we haven't seen the last of Barriss, but, I mean, we haven't seen her again yet. So, yeah, I hope that we get some resolution on screen, whether it's in a comic or a TV show or something. I hope we see her again, but in the absence of that, I'm going to just think that maybe Henry Gilroy is right.
Yeah. I think it would be cool if she were to come back, that it was involving Ahsoka and Sabine's story, so that there would be some tension there.
At the very least, Ahsoka, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, there is so much tension there. They were friends, and then she framed Ahsoka, and then, like, what if they became friends again? That'd be an interesting story.
Yeah. Andrew Kylo Ren wants to know if the theory floating around Twitter that Qi'ra sent the Inquisitors after Maul could be possible.
I, for the life of me, can't remember who suggested this first. It was, like, right after Solo, and it was on Twitter. It was someone we follow. I wish I could remember, but I liked some of that idea. I don't think that Qi'ra was the original person to sick Inquisitors after Maul. I think he's been hunted for a while, because in Solo he has the Inquisitor lightsaber, so I have to assume that means that he was met by one, he killed him, and then took his lightsaber. Now, the idea that Qi'ra abandoned Maul on Malachor, I really like that she just dumped him there and took control of Crimson Dawn. I think that is a really cool idea.
Yeah. That would be cool. Eric Wall asks where all the Mandalorian clans are in the Clone Wars. Did we just not see them?
I kind of think that's probably the case, that maybe they were around and just in the background. But on the other hand, I think it maybe was like a thing of the past where there were all these clans and houses, and then during the Clone Wars, there's this big push to be pacifist, so maybe they were trying to remove those conflicts of houses and clans. But then Satine dies at the end of the Clone Wars and the Empire takes over. So maybe they fell back into those old ways and they just rose back up and kind of splintered and divided, started to fight for power amongst themselves. So yeah, I could see it going either way, and maybe we'll explore it more in The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I mean, if we follow the idea that history repeats itself, I like the idea that after the Empire and everything, that they bring back the house names or the clans. And yeah, and the Mandalorian, I think that might be a thing.
It's like poetry. It's like it rhymes.
Kevin Dragos wants to know if anyone wondered about Luke's lineage when they heard his last name. Did people ever guess he was related to the Jedi hero from the Clone Wars?
I don't know. I mean, it's possible that Skywalker is one of those just common names and we don't know it. I think that's unlikely because it would be so confusing to the audience. But, I mean, the real truth is that George sat down to write this story and he was like, Skywalker's a cool name. And that's the jumping off point. Yeah. And I don't think that he had all this stuff figured out necessarily. Like, he obviously didn't have the prequels fully formed in his mind, so now it's like we're trying to reconcile this, and it's just one of those things where, like, why didn't you change his last name? If you're trying to hide him from Anakin Skywalker, you gave him to the only family Anakin has left, and you didn't change his last name to Lars.
Yeah. I mean, he did live a pretty sheltered life all the way out on Tatooine and didn't get out much, it sounds like, so maybe nobody really knew that name. The Hutts might have known about the name, so
well, yeah,
that could have been dangerous.
Those are both good points because yeah, they're out on Tatooine. Luke describes it as the farthest from the center of the galaxy as it possibly could be. The Clone Wars didn't really go there, so people probably didn't know who Anakin Skywalker even was, except for Watto and Owen and Beru. But Jabba might remember the Jedi that pulled a lightsaber on him.
Probably did.
when his son was kidnapped. And then maybe he heard the name Skywalker and was like, could it be? We better go kill him just in case.
Yeah.
And then Obi-Wan has to protect him from Hutts and gangsters.
There's the Obi-Wan movie.
There we go.
And I also think it would be cool if people did know that that was his last name and they knew the legend and it was just kind of this thing that people kind of whispered about at bars, but were just too afraid to really talk about
Let's
it.
not bring it up, yeah.
Yeah, like, I like the idea that some people did know and just were too scared to bring it up to anyone.
That's possible. And that now makes me think of a deleted scene from A New Hope where Garvin Drace, before they go to the Battle of Yavin, he approaches Luke and he's like, I knew your father. We flew together. He was a great pilot. And it's a good thing that was deleted because I don't think it meshes very well with what we know now. But
yeah.
I would expect once he joined the rebellion, then it was like, I mean, Bail Organa, if he ever heard of this Luke Skywalker kid, he knew for sure, obviously. So
Yeah.
What am I talking about? Of course he knew. So I think there were probably a handful of people here and there that pieced it together, but we'll never know.
Flaming Whiskers asks if the fact that the Star Wars canon is a multimedia project is a double-edged sword.
I think that it can be. I think Star Wars is unique because it's the only universe I can think of that has so many different sources of new content. Like, a lot of people like to compare Star Wars with the MCU, and they're mostly movies, and then they do have some TV shows. But that's it. I think that's all it is. I don't know if they do books or like MCU specific comics.
Mm-hmm.
But Star Wars, you have your movies, your TV shows, your books, your comics, your video games. There's a lot.
Yeah.
And it definitely makes it challenging to plan what goes where. And I think that's part of the reason, at least, that Lucasfilm has been slower than people would like to explore the Old Republic, because it's like, what stories do we make into movies, and what's a good book? What are we doing TV shows here? Like, you have to figure out the history first, almost. Figure out what stories you want to tell and where, and that's just difficult. And the example that he gave was seeing Maul's death in Rebels. And would that have been cool to see on the big screen, especially now that he's back in Solo? Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been, but the story's already been told.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I feel like Legends set fans up to expect that amount of content because Star Wars stories just kind of splintered off into all different directions with Legends. I mean, different authors and things like that were telling Star Wars stories. And then once Legends and Canon were kind of split up, we had the Clone Wars, which was a show that was kind of giving everyone Star Wars at a pretty regular pace. And I think people just got to the point where they expect like a regular dose of Star Wars in their lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird the way that back in the old EU it was books and comics and video games, and there wasn't really a whole lot of continuity. I mean, they paid attention to the broad strokes, but there were contradictions, and I mean, there are going to be contradictions in canon too. It's just the nature of something so big. But you had your EU stuff, and then when George started the Clone Wars, sometimes they'd bring in EU stuff, but for the most part, George was just like, I'm going to do what I want. And he considered the movies and the Clone Wars his universe, and he allowed the EU to be there, but that was never his story.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, even then, it was still not really super planned out. It was just all of these authors making things up as they went. Interesting, Michael Stackpole told me that they would kind of collaborate as best they could. They didn't have a Lucasfilm story group, but when he was writing the X-Wing books, he would talk to Timothy Zahn about, like, what's Coruscant like? Because Timothy Zahn built up Coruscant for the first time. So
yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a common courtesy, I would think, to as a writer, to not like completely rewrite the history of something that's already been written about.
But then some writers, I feel like, treated other writers' characters with disrespect. And I know that some people don't like certain authors because they just kind of did their own thing with characters that they didn't create, and they felt a little weird about that. So I don't know. I do think it is a double-edged sword. I think that's a good way to put it, because on the one hand, I think it's going to make things overall more consistent. It won't be perfect, but on the other hand, they have to be a lot more careful, and they have to plan all these things. And yeah, it's super challenging.
Yeah.
That's it for patron questions. If you're a patron and you didn't see your question answered here, just head over to Patreon, where we left you a written response. If you're not a patron, you can learn more by following the link in the description. Just $1 a month gets you access to extra Star Wars Explained goodies like audio commentaries for the films. We just did our commentary for The Last Jedi, and it's out right now. So you can sign up for that, and the combined donations really go a long way in supporting the channel.
That one's a good one, too. I think we get in a couple arguments.
Do we?
On to YouTube questions. Padawan of Christ asks where Leia got her dress in the Ewok village. Aww.
Well, the popular Twitter theory right now that I don't necessarily agree with is that it was a dress that belonged to someone else that the Ewoks ate before.
You don't agree with that?
No, I don't really think so. I mean, I do think that the Ewoks were totally going to eat Han and Luke, and they were going to try to eat R2, I guess. But I think that more likely they know how to make some clothes. They made their little hoods. So I think someone just made her a dress.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping.
Or.
Okay.
Here's my theory. I think that the Ewoks did manage to get off of Endor every once in a while, or there was some kind of civilization on the other side of the moon. But in order to blend in, they needed something to wear so that maybe 2 or 3 of them could stack on each other's shoulders, Little Rascal style, and sneak into a bar or something, and, you know.
Clearly, that's just a furry man.
Yeah. I mean, or a large Ewok. Maybe they were trying to get people to think that they were bigger than they really were.
Or Wookiees.
I'm just imagining 3 Ewoks, the top one pretending to be a Wookiee now.
With his little stubby arms.
Yeah. People are like, what happened to the Wookiees?
I've heard another random theory that the dress once belonged to Sindel Tawani from the made-for-TV Ewok movies, so I tend to lean towards the happier ones.
Yeah, like, I like that.
Without the eating of people. But, I mean, that's totally possible. Or, you know, Little Rascals.
Yeah. Jay Mikowski wants to know if there should be an opening crawl before every episode of The Mandalorian.
That seems excessive.
It does.
Maybe before the first one. But, I mean, if you're binging the show, I think that would just get kind of old. I mean, how much is the galaxy really going to change in between every episode?
Yeah. That first little tidbit that we got from him on Instagram is basically an opening crawl.
Right.
And for me, I think the first episode should start just like going directly into action, gunslinging. Like, I think that's Jon Favreau's style. But yeah, no, I think crawls on a show like this, I don't think we need them.
Considering Rogue One and Solo didn't have crawls, I don't think the show is going to get one. Maybe it'll get like a little prologue. Maybe they'll flash that text up just to set the stage, kind of like Solo had the blue text. Mm-hmm. Maybe they'll do something like that, but for every episode, I just can't see that.
I like the idea of this being more Rogue One style, where it's, I don't know, it's like real world enough to where you can understand what's going on without having to need a crawl.
Yeah.
To give you a preface.
I mean, at this point, everyone knows what Star Wars is, so that's probably all you need to know. It's like, this takes place in the Star Wars universe. Look, it's that guy, like, he's got a cool helmet like that one guy.
Yeah.
So, like, everyone can get into
Maybe
this.
That'll be the crawl.
Look at that guy. He's got a helmet. Sure is neat, huh? Watch him for a while.
Remember the holiday special? Anyways. Nico asks if the droid Gotra, the Cyban Front, or other droid organizations could help the Resistance in exchange for droid rights in the New Republic.
I like that idea. I don't think we'll see it in episode 9 super heavily, just because, like, I don't think the droid Gotra is going to come in and save the day.
Yeah, that I don't know if there's going to be room for that.
It'd be like Pippin in Lord of the Rings. The Eagles are coming. The droid Gotra's coming. But everyone's like, what? Who?
Yeah.
Now, they've been talking about droid rights a lot, and, like, the droid Gotra has come up a lot in the comics. Mm-hmm. So after episode 9, if we get some stories filling in that gap between 8 and 9, I think that would be great to see, like the droid Gotra coming into the New Republic or the Resistance to help things out.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great.
Especially if, I've been talking about Lando and my thoughts on him coming into episode 9, maybe bringing not necessarily a droid army, but a decent amount of droids to help for the Resistance. I could definitely see that turning into something down the line involving droid rights.
Especially because he has that droid company in the book Last Shot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it would be cool and a nice new touch to see the New Republic have a representative for droids and droid rights. And he's like, they build the perfect droid senator and no one can beat him in debates and they all hate him.
So you.
What?
Trenton Dixon wants to know if Kaz's father could be a centrist in the New Republic Senate, secretly supporting the First Order.
I'm like, I kind of hope he doesn't support the First Order, but if Kaz is from Hosnian Prime, which it sounds like he is, and his father's a senator, I assume of Hosnian Prime, he probably is a centrist, because the book Bloodline talks about how the richer planets like Coruscant and probably Hosnian Prime were more likely to lean centrist. So, yeah, I could see him definitely being on that side politically. Not all of the centrists supported the First Order, though. Mm-hmm. They weren't all evil, like Ransom Casterfo. Casterfo, that's how you say it. Claudia Gray corrected me in person on that. So I don't think he necessarily has to be First Order sympathetic, but he could be.
I don't know. That's a lot to throw at a show for kids age 6 to 12. I guess. Especially if we're going to eventually get to the events of The Force Awakens, and if his dad is on Hosnian Prime, might not make it.
Which, that feels gut-wrenching to me.
Yeah. Or if his dad were to somehow escape before Hosnian Prime is destroyed, and he supported the First Order, that could absolutely bring up some interesting conflict down the road, maybe in season 2 of Resistance. Like, we think his dad is dead, but then he comes back in season 2.
Okay, I do like that. I think that's pretty interesting. And even the question suggests that it would bring up some family drama like Star Wars likes to do. And yeah, that would be a lot for Kaz to handle, to find out that his dad was on the side of the First Order after thinking he was dead. Mm-hmm. It's like a new spin on Darth Vader almost. Okay, you talked me into it. I kind of like that.
All right. Umar Sadiq asks what our ideal end to the Skywalker saga would be.
I kind of hope that Ben Solo, who I would consider to be the last of the Skywalker line, I hope that he's dead, honestly. He could be redeemed, he could not be, but I kind of want the Skywalker line to literally end. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be a nice story to have it start with Anakin, who is like born of the Force. There could be other Skywalkers out there. Shmi might have had a brother or something. But then we have Anakin and we have Luke and we have Ben, and it's like this story of how 3 generations of Skywalkers just caused chaos in the galaxy. But I hope that by the end, ultimately, they affect positive change for the galaxy as a whole, whether that's through the Force or politically or both. I don't know. I just want them to leave the galaxy better than they found it, and I think that would be a good story.
Yeah. So I've wrestled with the idea of whether or not I think Kylo Ren is going to live or die or be redeemed and then live or die, and I can't decide. I mean, I don't know. I kind of think he needs to die, but he could still be redeemed before that. What about Leia?
I just don't think that she's going to have another kid. She can survive.
Yeah.
I just don't think that she is going to extend the Skywalker line beyond Ben Solo.
Yeah.
So it's all dependent on him, I think. And yeah, I would argue that Leia could ultimately definitely affect the galaxy in a positive way. She's done more than any of Luke or Anakin or Ben have. I mean, she's been in the fight politically and literally fighting.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have for questions today. If you want to leave a question for next week's video, just put it in the comments below or sign up for Patreon to join our weekly Q&A discussion. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
And as always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.